Hello, my students. I hope you've had a good afternoon so far. Yes, you're all looking much more hungover than usual. I trust you all had a safe and enjoyable holiday weekend. Of course. What's college if you don't treat Memorial Day weekend like any other Friday night? Well, you all have your textbooks, right? Perfect. Okay. So today we are going to be discussing the Weber and Rinne tests. Now, can anybody please tell me what these tests are and what they're used for? Anybody? Oh, come on, guys. It's Tuesday. Okay, Kyle? No, Kyle. That's not even close. Alright, Kyle, I'm not sure what you're doing here, but if you would like to leave at any point, right, just don't hit any drywall on the way out. We'll have to speak to the dean again. Okay, thank you, Kyle. Okay, would anybody else like to answer? You, perhaps? I'll give you guys a little bit of a break. So the Weber and Rinne tests are two hearing tests that we conduct using a tuning fork. And these tests are used to determine if a patient has normal hearing or perhaps has sensorineural or conductive hearing loss. Now, we use these tests both in conjunction with one another. You don't perform just one test. You have to use them both. However, it does not matter which order you do them in. So, in addition to learning what these tests are, how we can determine what kind of hearing loss or normalcy of hearing we have, we will also be going over a few vocabulary words, and this will be in the midterm, okay? Alright, I'm not going to say it again. You should just assume that these are all going to be in the midterm. Okay, so for both the Weber and Rinne hearing tests, we're going to be using a 512 Hertz tuning fork. Right. So we have two tuning forks here. However, this is a 128 Hertz tuning fork, but this is the one, the 512, that we're going to be using. Now today we are going to be practicing the Rinne and Weber test, so if you need a set of tuning forks, which I highly suggest you get your own, but we do have a few for the class to use at the back. You may get them at any point. So we're going to go with a little bit of information about the Weber and Rinne tuning fork tests. So we're going to start with the Weber test. Again, it does not matter which test you use first. However, you do make sure that you do both. So with our Weber test, this is going to determine conductive or sensory neural hearing loss, but we also need to use the Renee test to confirm that it is. So in a normal patient, we would conduct this test by striking or flicking our tuning fork and putting the bottom, which may have a bell on it or maybe just like this, and we put that at either the top of the forehead or the top of the head. You can also do it right here, although I would not suggest that, as that is a little uncomfortable, but that is another way you can do it, above the lip, over the teeth, and under the nose. So we strike our tuning fork and we place it, for example, the top of the forehead, and we ask which side the patient hears the sound the loudest. In a normal response, it should be at the midline. However, if we are looking at sensory neural or conductive hearing loss, then we're going to have a nice little vocabulary word here. We're going to see a lateralization. Now, this lateralization means that when we place it at the top of the head or the forehead, we're going to have the patient tell us that it's loudest on one ear or the other. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't tell us much except that there is a problem. So we will dig a little deeper. But what this could mean is our lateralization, for example, is on the left. So our patient hears the sound much more clearly, much louder on the left side of the ear, left ear rather. So a couple more vocabulary words for you. We have ipsilateral, which means the same ear. So we have the lateralization of the sound going towards our left ear. So this is going to be our ipsilateral ear, whereas the opposite ear is going to be our contralateral ear. All of those terms will be on the midterm once again. So, our patient has a left ear lateralization, so this can mean two things. Either on our ipsilateral side, we have some conductive hearing loss, or on our contralateral side, we have sensory neural hearing loss. Now, I've been throwing these words out quite a bit. Can anybody tell me what sensory neural hearing loss is, or conductive hearing loss is? Anybody? Kyle, I thought I told you to leave. No. Well, if you're going to be disrespectful, then I'm going to have you leave. Okay, if you sit quietly, then you can stay. I know you're just auditing this class, but you will follow the rules. Thank you, Kyle. Anybody? Okay. So, our conductive hearing loss has to do with a problem of the sound traveling to the inner ear. So with our conductive hearing loss, we're having an issue with the inner ear rather with a sensory neural hearing loss. We're having issues with the auditory nerve or the cochlea and/or. So sensory neural is going to be cochlear and auditory nerve, whereas conductive is going to be your issues with sound traveling to the inner ear. So, we can either have the conductive hearing loss is going to be in the ear that hears the louder sound, or the sensory neural with the opposite ear. So, in order to determine which one it is, we then conduct the Rinne test. Now, the Rinne test, we are going to strike our tuning fork, and then we're going to place the bottom of the tuning fork on the mastoid process, and you're going to press quite firmly. You can also press it really on any bony area behind the ear. However, for this test, let's say the mastoid process. Press quite firmly. You ask the patient if they first hear the sound, and then when the sound stops. So we strike our tuning fork, place it on the mastoid process, have them signal to us that they can hear it, and then we ask them to tell us when we can no longer hear it. As soon as they can no longer hear it, I'm going to have you then take the tuning fork off of the mastoid process and hold it perpendicularly to the ear, somewhat close, and ask if they can hear that, which they should be able to, and then ask when it stops. Now for the Rinne test, the bone conduction should be less than your air conduction. The bone conduction is going to be the sound you hear pressing the tuning fork to the mastoid process, and air conduction is going to be the sound that you hear right past the ear here. So, now the way that we grade this test is going to be Rinne's positive or Rinne's negative. In the Rinne's positive test, this is going to be a normal response in that you press your tuning fork to the mastoid process, and then you hold it by the ear, and the air conduction is generally about twice as long as your bone conduction. And as long as the air conduction is greater than the bone conduction, then that is going to be a Rinne's positive test, which again is a normal response. However, if you, for example, only hear it with bone conduction, or the bone conduction is greater than the air conduction, that's going to be our Rinne's negative response. So we're going to go back to the Rinne test with our tuning fork. So we have our lateralization on the left side. So we're going to do our test. We'll do our bone conduction, wait until it's done, and then do our air conduction. And for example, let's say that we get a Rinne's positive. So we have a normal response in this ear. That means that this ear is fine. We do not have any conductive hearing loss. And instead, we actually have a problem with the other ear. And that's going to be our sensory neural hearing loss. But just to double check, we do want to make sure to do it on both ears. So if I did this test and then we got a Rinne's negative to where the bone conduction is greater than the air, then that means there's conductive hearing loss in this ear and not sensory neural in this one. So, does anybody Have any questions so far? Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to have everybody partner up and we're going to practice the Weber and Rinne test. So if you'd like to get into groups of 2, and I know we haven't all met each other yet, so please do introduce yourself, make sure you know each other's names, and then we can get started. Okay, everybody partnered up? Okay, except for you. Okay, well, you have won the privilege of being my partner. So, my name is Calliope. Okay. Yes, that's a pretty great name. I do enjoy that quite a bit. So, for this test, everybody, we want to remember to please sanitize our hands. Ideally, we would be wearing gloves. However, for this practice, we're just going to be sanitizing. Do you have your own sanitizer, sweetheart? Okay, wonderful. Okay. So, before we begin the Weber and Rinne test, I want everyone to please get out your otoscope. And before conducting these tests on a patient, you should be making sure that the ear is healthy, of course, free from obstructions, and that the tympanic membrane is intact. Now, I hope that everybody's instruments are sterilized beforehand. This instrument is sterilized, just so that you know. And remember that we use the largest speculum that we can when inspecting the ear. So everybody remembers to hold your otoscope like a pen, right? And to keep your pinky placed against the head in order to make sure that if they move around, you're not going to be stabbing them in the ear. So another thing that we all need to remember is we place the otoscope into the ear and then we look into it. Then you can pull back the ear and we can look into it, okay? Okay. Do you mind if I look into your ear, please? Okay, thank you. I'm going to be getting a little closer. Okay. I'm going to be looking at this ear first, if you don't mind. Okay, I'm just going to place the otoscope in the ear and pulling the ear up and backwards. Okay, and placing my eye up to the otoscope. Okay. Alright, the ear is healthy, clear, and the tympanic membrane is a pearly gray. Okay, wonderful. And now the other side. Okay, placing the otoscope into the ear and pulling the ear upwards and back and getting my eye up there. Okay, once again, yeah, very good. Free from inflammation, obstructions, tympanic membrane looks beautiful. We're going to be putting that away. We will not need that for any more of this test. Wonderful. Okay, dear. Now, I'm not very great at this tuning fork thing, at least as far as striking it goes. I may have to try a couple different times. Just bear with me, please. So first on you, I'd like to conduct the Weber test, if that's okay. Okay, great. Alright, let's see if we can do this. I'm going to try striking it on my wrist first. There we go. Alright, that's how we do it. Okay, can you please tell me if the sound is more to the left, the right, or the midline? The midline. Wonderful. So we have a normal Weber test. Now I'm going to have you pretend that it's on one side or the other, okay? Can you please tell me if this is more on the left side, the right side, or the midline? More on the left side here. Okay, I'm going to be conducting the Renee test now. Do you mind if I do that? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to be first doing it on your affected ear. So, what I'm going to do is strike the tuning fork and place it on your mastoid process. I want you to please tell me when you hear the sound, and then when the sound goes away. Right there. Okay, goes away, okay. And then, right, okay, went away. Okay, again, I'm going to place it on your mastoid process. Please tell me when you hear the sound, when the sound goes away, and then I'm going to hold it by your ear, and I want you to tell me when that sound goes away, okay? Okay. Goes away. Okay, let's do that one more time. Mastoid process. Goes away. Okay, and then that goes away. So we have a normal Renee or Renee's positive test on this ear. So then we can deduce that there would be a sensory neural hearing loss on the other ear. However, we are still going to conduct Renee's test. Okay, again, I'm going to place it on your mastoid process, the tuning fork rather. I want you to signal to me that you hear it when it stops. Then I'm going to place it by your ear. Tell me when that stops. Okay? Wonderful. Okay, stops. Okay, stops. 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 Okay. So we have a Renee's negative there. So that would mean that we have some sensory neural loss. However, of course on you, we have a Renee's positive on both ears. So I'll have all of you practice a little bit more on each other, and we will be having a quiz on this in a couple days after we talk a little bit more about different hearing tests. You are all more than welcome to stay as long as you'd like. I can explain more if you'd like. I'm just going to be sitting quietly over here while you all practice for the rest of the class. Okay? Alright. Thank you so much for for coming to class today. I hope to see you guys again here tomorrow. Wonderful. Thank you.